In 2016, archaeologist Bradley Lepper identified Ohio's Reservoir Stone Mound as the largest known indigenous lithic structure north of Mexico. The site, recorded as 33L120 in Licking County, was a monumental construction of loose stone covering a surprisingly well-preserved mortuary cache. And in 1823, the Ohio State Canal Commissioners decided it would make an excellent riprap for their new reservoir. Wagon load after wagon load was hauled away to create what is now Buckeye Lake. And within 30 years, they accidentally exposed the archaeological treasure trove beneath it. Long before Buckeye Lake existed, this part of ancient America was already a landscape of monuments. The Ohio Valley is world-renowned for its earthworks, mounds, and geometric formations. But only a few miles southeast of what is now Jacksontown, Ohio, there was something that did not fit the normal pattern. It was the only stone mega-construction of its kind in North America known to date. A huge mass of loose stone piled into a steep monumental form. Early descriptions place it at 50 feet high and nearly 200 feet wide. The mound rose sharply from the hilltop and could be seen for miles in the distance. This was not a cut stone temple, no carved blocks and no formal masonry here. Just stone after stone, gathered, carried, and piled into this deliberate ancient form. By the time European observers were describing it, they were already looking at a damaged monument. An estimated 15 feet of the top had been carried away by the mid-1800s. And still, in 1838, Charles Whittlesey described what remained as,
"Even now, a commanding object, rising among the trees of a thrifty western forest."
And its not-so-subtle size and location is exactly what led to its demise. The problem was water. The Ohio Erie Canal was one of the greatest infrastructure projects of the early 1800s. But canals do not work on ambition alone. They need a constant supply of water. And at Licking Summit, the highest point along this part of that canal route, meant draining a swamp or flooding it. The decision was made to turn the swampy basin into what became known as the Licking Reservoir, a feeder lake that would keep the new canal supplied with water and the boats moving. But creating a reservoir means damming the water and shoring its banks. And this new reservoir needed building material. And sitting just a few miles away, already gathered and stacked, sat a giant stone mound. It was only one of the largest ancient monuments in North America, but hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. And less work was their answer. Beginning in 1823, they began removing the stones. Thousands of wagon loads. It was estimated that around 20,000 were taken. 50 teams took load after load from the mound and hauled them toward the reservoir. By 1896, when Warren K. Moorhead studied what remained, he was no longer looking at the original structure. He was looking at a ruin created by progress. The ancient builders had placed them with intention, and the canal builders removed them with purpose. And when they did, the workers found that the monument was not solid stone like they had hoped. It was covering something. They found earthworks, smaller mounds. Reports described 15 to 16 small earthen mounds arranged amid the circumference of the stone mound. Monuments inside a monument. The outside was a colossal shell of stones, covering something even older and sacred. Under that rock, inside one of those earthen mounds, they eventually found a feature that would not have survived somewhere else: wood, bone, hair. The soggy clay soil had preserved the remarkable, and that is where the archaeology gets very interesting. The earthen mound held a wooden feature that early accounts described as a trough or a coffin and something like a platform. It was sealed in clay in a basin that held water. That changed everything, because organic material usually disappears. But here, the same wet conditions that created the mound's demise kept these burial features from vanishing. In 1863, James and Charles Salisbury's description says,
2 long oak sleepers were laid parallel at the bottom. Shorter pieces were placed across them. Over that was the wooden platform. Around it were traces of burnt posts. Beneath it was ash. And inside this protected clay basin, they found human remains. Locks of black hair, copper rings, and a copper ornament described as a breastplate.
this was not just stuff inside a mound. A body was placed inside a carefully constructed mortuary space, and that matters because it changes what the Great Stone Mound was about. It was not just a pile of stones. This monument had been built over a mortuary site, and a fragment of that wood survived long enough for archaeologist Bradley Lepper to get something almost impossible from a monument destroyed so long ago. He got a date. The results of his radiocarbon analysis landed around 100 AD, and that places the burial feature in the early Middle Woodland period. And that is interesting timing. This is the era when the Ohio Valley begins turning their earthen architecture into something enormous. Adena communities had already been building mounds, but around this window, the scale changes. The architecture gets bigger. The labor required gets harder to ignore. And over time, that same Ohio Valley tradition moves from great burial monuments toward the geometric earthworks that make the region famous today. Reservoir Stone Mound sits near the beginning of that story, a colossal stone monument built at the dawn of that age, when ancient Ohio began reshaping whole landscapes, proving that ancient North America was never a place of small ideas. Well, I hope you leave feeling a bit smarter